Oops. Hello, I'm Elbert Perez, 2005 game design and game development graduate from Full Sail University. And I'm here to talk about my journey. Um, I am what you call a technologist slash gamer. So as you can see here in this picture, this was during my Hall of Fame induction year. I am very much into VR and video games, as well as augmented reality. But before we get to those technologies, I want to talk about my past and where I came from. So just like you guys, I did not grow up in the United States. I was born here, but I grew up in Manila in the Philippines, which is very familiar place to you guys because to me, like Manila and Sao Paulo or Rio or other cities in Brazil are very similar in terms of people smiling all over the place, people being friendly and happy and always eating. So for me, growing up in Manila, it was very interesting time for me because knowing that I had to kind of come back to the United States and growing up there in the 90s and the late 80s, it was fun. Video games were kind of on the rise, playing with the Sega Genesis, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and playing a lot of video games growing up. And knowing that, playing video games a lot, I wanted to make a career out of that. So back then, I remember this was in 2000. I kind of looked up, uh, how do I make video games? And back then, Full Sail and another school were the only two choices. And I did my research, and because of that, I was able to kind of figure out that hey, I should check out Full Sail. But before we talk about Full Sail, I want to talk about my gaming background or what games kind of help shape who I am and what I do. So some of these games are kind of on the older side at this point. So the one up here in the upper left, it's a game called StarCraft. If you guys don't know, it's a real-time strategy game built by Blizzard. It's a big AAA studio down in Irvine, California. If you don't know Blizzard, if you're into games, then you should know them because they make Overwatch and StarCraft and a bunch of and World of Warcraft, most especially. They make a lot of games, and this kind of helped my growing up. And a lot of you guys probably know about Counter-Strike as well, right? Up in the upper right corner, I played a lot of the Dust. This is the map, or the Dust 2 rather, for this map, and it's been fun. It's like I spent so much of my high school playing video games. Like I would get trouble with my parents because I would just go straight from school straight to the parlor or the computer cafe. So that was a fun time in my life in high school. And jokes on people like saying like what are you gonna do playing video games all in high school? But I'm gonna make games when I graduate. So kind of helped out that I actually made a career out of it. In the lower left here, Quake 3, probably not as popular in Brazil, but it was a very fun first-person shooter made by id. Before I go talk about id, upper right, it's made by Valve, the Counter-Strike, or at least they were bought by Valve. It was started as a mod, and then Valve bought the rights to the game. And Valve is actually based in Bellevue, Washington. And I am in Seattle right now, so Valve is actually pretty close by. And another one of our Hall of Famers, Jeff Unai, actually works for Valve, and has been there for a long time now. And back to the lower left here is Quake 3, which is a game made by id. They're down in Texas. We have a lot of Full Sail grads working there. But this thing about id and this game, it's one of the pioneers of first-person shooters, even around the time of Counter-Strike over there, and it's a very important part of my childhood too, playing a lot of this. And even further back with Sonic 2 in the middle down here, as you can see Sonic and Mile or Tails and Dr. Robotnik. Platforming games and the Sega Genesis was a big part of my childhood. And for anyone who's played Final Fantasy VIII, here's a screenshot down the lower right, which I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy. I didn't play all of them, but 8 kind of resonated with me. I know there's a lot of 7 fans and the more modern 13 and 15 Final Fantasy games. But with Final Fantasy 7 Remake, it's kind of fun to talk about Final Fantasy right now. And that's basically my childhood. I knew pretty much that my dream was to do video games, and this really kind of helped my decision to go to Full Sail. And so I want to talk about Full Sail next. Okay, so now I want to talk about my journey from the Philippines to Full Sail. So you can see over here, I have on the screen is a map of how far Manila is to Orlando. I've done the trip from Orlando to Brazil twice, so I understand what far is. And Manila to Philippines is pretty far as well. It says here 19 hours and 50 minutes, but it actually took 24 hours to get from the Philippines to Orlando. I actually took note of that, and that kind of just stuck with me when I started. So basically, when I decided to start my career, it was basically a turning point in high school. When I graduated, my parents were like, you're a citizen of the United States, you should go there. I'm like, well, I already passed one of the schools here in the Philippines, maybe I'll do college here. And they were pretty insistent for me to actually take advantage of that. But I did tell them, like, if I am going to go to the United States, I am going to pick where I go. So after doing a lot of research, I decided to go to Full Sail University. So one thing back then was there's behind the scenes tours, kind of similar to what we're doing now. But it was smaller, and it's a different time. The school was a lot smaller back then. But I wasn't going to travel all the way from Manila to Orlando just to check it out. Thankfully, my older brother, lived in Boston at that time. So he flew down from Boston to Orlando to attend one of the behind the scenes tours. And from there, he was very impressed and said, like, you know what, Full Sail is actually a real school, a good school. You should go for it. And so that kind of started off my journey. I emailed Full Sail and I said, hey, I want to start school there. And the rep that I got in touch with, her name's Karina Secor. She still works there, and still really good friends, and has been keeping in touch throughout my whole career at Full Sail, and even when I graduated to now. So from there, kind of set up everything, got approved to do it. So I packed up my bags and then flew over to Orlando, and that's where my Full Sail journey kind of began. So at this point, I'm going to talk about what my experience is at Full Sail, and my experience at Full Sail has been great, right? So as an international student, in terms of not in terms of enrollment or anything like that, but of cultural, it was kind of a shock as well. I grew up speaking English. They teach English in Manila, so it wasn't really a language barrier, but more of a change of how I should think of things, right? Because growing up in a different country, moving to a new country as an adult, as an 18-year-old young adult, it's still jarring, even though I knew a lot about American culture and all that fun stuff. It is still very different when you start living. And I'm sure when you talk to other grads from that, Brazilian grads and other international students, they will tell you the same thing. It is quite a culture shock, but it is something that's actually fun. It's challenging, but for me, like when I started, I made my first friend pretty much the day I was picking up my badge. It's orientation day. I just was walking back to my apartment, and I just said hi to this person who was walking with me. And apparently it was a person that was in the same class as I was, and from there we just kind of talked, and we were in the same apartment complex because we were walking towards back the same area, and we just formed a friendship there. And I would say that it's actually pretty easy to make friends in America. I know sometimes when you're in a different country, you kind of keep to yourself, but a lot of times when you're in America or other students really in the school, they're just as lonely as you, right? Because they moved from somewhere far, and there's a lot of locals who are from Orlando and Florida in general going to school, but I think most of the students that kind of go there are from out of state or out of country. So don't be afraid when you go there and meet with students and think, hey, are they gonna like me? For the most part, they want to meet you and know about you because they're lonely too. So that was my journey, and everything about Full Sail. It's a very intense school. I'm not gonna lie, it was very hard. I had to make a lot of decisions. Like for example, I told myself, "Hey, Elbert, don't have a girlfriend because you have to concentrate on school." And I stuck to that, right? I was like, I'm gonna concentrate on what I need to do because it's such a challenging, rigorous degree, especially for game development. And I'm sure all the other degrees have their own different degrees of difficulty. But this is a lot of technical knowledge being thrown at you, and you really need to immerse yourself into it. And that's another thing that's super important. If you are going to go to the school, you should give your 100% to it, right? You can't go to Full Sail and think you're going to party or you're just going to take it easy. It is a school for people who really want to take their dream seriously. And if you do that, I guarantee you, everyone else around the school will kind of support you there. So that was my journey there. Kind of went through the school. Thankfully, I never had to repeat any class. And everything that I needed to know, I think I got through the school, especially back then. There wasn't a lot of information like YouTube or the internet. The internet was there, but it's not like how it is right now where you can literally get any information you want. So I really had to rely on my teachers and the course curriculum itself, and it helped me really a lot to do that. So I graduated, and I would say too, like I didn't have the best of grades. Like I would say, like I was middle of the class in terms of performance for grades, but I didn't let that be the thing that determines if I'm going to be successful or not. Remember, like growing up, we're probably very focused on grades. Hey, are you an A student? Are you this kind of student? And that kind of determines if you're going to be successful. But with Full Sail, like the grades matter, but it doesn't matter as much as what you learn and what you get out of it skills wise. So do you think about that when you're going through school? So if you get a B or a C or C plus or a C plus, it doesn't matter, right? What matters is, did you learn something? Did you get what you needed to get out of that class? And if you did, then I think that's going to help you out more than having said, I got an A, but I don't really know if I understood the material. So take that in mind, and I think you'll have a great experience at Full Sail. All right, so now I graduated from Full Sail. This was in 2005, around October. A little bit secret there. I started looking for work 8 months before I graduated, and I did that because I was scared. I did not want to end up working part-time at a Best Buy or having to work in a restaurant or something else. I wanted to work for a company close enough to my degree, right? And so I started looking for 8 months, and it was hard because I didn't really have the most hardcore programming. I didn't have the best resume at that point. I was very young. I was when I graduated, I was 20 years old, so I couldn't even drink in America back then. But thankfully, I was able to find work over in Seattle. So the story goes, I was talking to this recruiter, said like, hey, I have this contract position at Microsoft. Are you interested? I'm like, yeah. However, they were not gonna fly me over to Seattle to do the interview because it's contract work. So I had to kind of pay for it. So I was like, all right, I'll invest in that and kind of make sure to get hired. So I spent the money, flew over to Seattle, and this was towards the right before I graduated. So I flew up to Seattle, did the interview at Microsoft, which was very scary. because I've never done an actual job interview before this. So I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So kind of what I had to do was at that point YouTube was kind of picking up. Was kind of look up YouTube videos and see how do I actually interview for Microsoft. So I kind of did my research. Flew there. I talked to two different groups. Did my interviews. It was basically 3 hours each. It was kind of short because it was for contract. And I got offers from both, which was great because basically they gave me feedback after like right pretty much an hour or two after the interview, which is not typically the case for when you're an employee or something else. But back then in 2000, around 2005, they had a quick turnaround. So I knew that I had a job offer pretty much a few hours after I interviewed. And that was a mad scramble at that point to find, all right, so I need to move here. I need to find an apartment. So kind of scrambled around and tried to find an apartment. Thankfully, I was able to find an apartment complex and literally signed a lease that day as well. So this all happened within the span of, I think, 2 days. I basically flew in the day before the interview, did my interview, found my apartment the same day for that interview, and flew back to Orlando the next day. And guess what? From there, my friend picked me up from the airport, and we went straight into. Well, actually, what did I do? I think I had a car. Yeah, actually left my car in the airport, drove all the way straight to my graduation, and I was almost late. So pretty much from my interview straight to graduation, shook Gary Jones' hand, who is the president of the school, because he shakes almost everyone's hands when you graduate. And from there, went straight to my apartment, packed everything up, started shipping it to Seattle, and then flew back like almost like a week later to Seattle and started my job. And that turnaround was pretty crazy. And I was very happy because I didn't have to worry about what do I do after graduation, because I was able to get a job offer pretty much the week of my graduation. But that predicated or on a lot of hard work, a lot of luck, a lot of lot of effort to go out and really find that job that I want. If you start looking for a job when you graduate, it's a little bit too late, or you'll be waiting for a long time, and you're gonna feel like, hey, especially if you're coming from Brazil and you're going on OPT, you have a time limit, right? So you wanna start looking into your job before you graduate. So what was that first job I did? So my first job was actually not in games. So I went for game design and development, but I was kind of happy with our final project. And during that time, I didn't want to work in the game industry after I graduated because that time was when game developers were being abused, I guess, or made work long hours. The work-life balance was not very good, and I think I wanted something a little bit more balanced, especially after going through Full Sail, where it was kind of like super immersed. I wanted to kind of slow down a little bit, make sure that I find myself steady. And working for Microsoft as your first job is not really bad. It's not a bad thing. So back then, the screenshot I have here is of Windows Vista. I worked on Windows Vista as part of my first job out of school, which was pretty cool. I didn't work on all of it because Windows Vista, as we all know, Windows is a big, it's an operating system. I work on parts of it. Most relevant is what we call globalization and localization. So I work on a team that help translate and deal with issues with translating different components of Windows into different languages. So that was a fun experience. It was a 1-year contract. I learned a lot, especially being, and the job I took was a software developer, engineer, and test. So what that means is I'm a software developer, but I'm doing a lot of testing, which is a very different / unique skill set in the tech industry, because a lot of times you hear, if you're a game tester, you're just playing video games and you're kind of mindlessly doing it, but it's not. With this kind of testing, I have to apply all what I learned from Full Sail in software development and figure out, okay, as a software developer, how do I make sure the software ships without bugs? So it's a very legit and a very a good career path for a lot of people to, especially if you feel like you're not as strong as a hardcore programmer, but you understand the software as a whole, so you can definitely do it that way. So after that, I kind of had the itch of going back to games after a year. So at that point, when I was starting working on Vista, Xbox 360 launched. So with this, I worked on, after that contract, I jumped into the Xbox 360 team, helping out, uh, being an SDET as well, a software developer and test, working on the Blades UI or the dashboard Blades. So for anyone who remembers, back in the Xbox 360 days, the first dashboard they had was all 2D. It was very flat, very different from what we see in the modern Xbox operating systems. But it was an important job because I worked for the UI team. So basically, anyone who uses the UI had to use our software on the Xbox, especially Microsoft itself, because a lot of the dashboard was controlled by them. But it was also available to a lot of games to use it. So if they wanted to use a UI system that they didn't have to build, they could use this. I learned a lot, especially in the game industry, especially learning from the hardware side. Right? I had to know about the console a lot. I had to learn about publishing, different side. It wasn't exactly me making games, but it was on the OS that kind of supported games. And what's cooler than working on the Xbox 360, right? So, and that was a great gig. Lasted for half a year. Did a good job on that. And after that, I kind of moved on to smartphones. So this is around the time when, I remember distinctly I was working a different job, working on cell phones, and this was pre-iPhone, and then the iPhone came out, and that really changed the whole landscape, especially if you were working on cell phones before the iPhone. The iPhone was a game changer. It literally upended the whole industry. Um, so that was a very interesting change of pace. And the reason why I ended up here, because with Windows Phone, it was a brand new platform, and I wanted to work on mobile. And at this point in time, Windows Phone, iPhone, and Android already has taken off, and I wanted to work on a new platform and kind of figure out what I can do there. So from here, I worked on making my own indie games actually, and because of that, that really sparked a lot of the transition back into games. So going back to Windows Phone, I'm sorry, I worked on indie games. So basically, from my role in the Xbox 360, I was working on non-games. But on the Windows Phone, I decided, hey, I'm going to work on my own games. And this is for a whole year. I made close to $150,000 just publishing free games on the Windows Phone platform. And I was so happy to do that because I basically was an entrepreneur. I dealt with my own time, my own expenses. I was my own boss. I did most of the work. And I published close to like 36 games across, and not just on Windows Phone. I did it for Xbox 360, some on Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. And I had such a great time doing it. But as we all know, when you're an indie developer, you're not always going to have the success that will last forever. And I made the money, and then a call from Xbox, basically saying, "Hey, Elbert, we have this position open. Do you want to apply?" And so at this point, working in the Xbox One, I've always just been a contractor at Microsoft. This was the first time they actually said to me, "Hey, we want you to be an employee because of all the work you've done before, especially for the indie games that I've published and all the work I've done at Microsoft before." And it's also super important, right? When you're building out your game career or any career, right? It's like find the work that will help you get to where you want to be, right? Not all work is gonna be glamorous or big projects, but every single piece of work that you do kind of builds up on top of each other. So that's kind of important. This is where it led me to Xbox One. So with the Xbox One, I worked on a lot of cool projects. Smart Glass, which was a mobile-based platform that you could connect to your Xbox One and you can have a second screen experience. I worked on so many different titles to help support them get onto the screen. I worked on some launch titles as well, like Rise, Sun of Rome. I helped out with a little bit on Halo 4, a little bit on Sunset Overdrive, supporting all these other big IPs on the Xbox One. So that was cool. Unfortunately, as with you'd hear anything in the games industry or in tech industry, layoffs do happen, and I was laid off from this job because of some bean counter, right? Some accounting. Someone decided to reorganize Microsoft, the games division, and then it was deemed my role was redundant. Even though my manager was happy with me, my group was happy with me. It's just that the role I was in was made redundant. So that's kind of part of life in the industry. You could be doing all the right things, but you can still get laid off. But thankfully, it's actually not that hard to pick yourself back up. So what did I do with that being laid off? So I decided to go back into making more indie games. So this one is called Habitat. This one was created in Steam. Basically, my old boss from 2 years before this game asked me, "Hey, Elbert, do you want to work in this game? I like working with you. Let's work in this crazy idea I have." I'm like, "All right, let's go." So this is what happened. We created this game. It's on Steam, and it was a Kickstarter game too. So the funny thing too with this project was when I was laid off at Microsoft, I um, I was already working on this as a side project. So the day that they told me, "Hey, Albert, we're gonna lay you off," was the day we started a Kickstarter for this game. So basically, in a span of 20 minutes, I was late. I was jobless, and then pretty much transitioned full time onto this project. This was a 1 year project. We traveled all over America demonstrating this, in GDC, Game Developers Conference in California. We went to Boston to PAX to kind of show it off in Seattle as well. And so that was kind of fun. However, with all indie games, a lot of times you ship the game, you sell, a couple thousand units, tens of thousands of units, and then you shut down the studio, right? And that's just kind of how life is. But I learned a lot, especially I transitioned and picked up new skills, especially working with Unity. This is kind of how it began. All right, so now I've worked in the game industry for, I don't know, 8 years, 6 years, a long time. And the cool thing about having my full sail background was that I learned a lot of the foundational things that help me today, like programming, business, thinking fast on my feet, and really being able to adapt to all kinds of situations. Because one thing for sure in the tech industry or any industry that Full Sail teaches is that everything constantly changes, right? The world constantly changes. Even right now, right? The world is going through a big change. We're all kind of feeling it right now, and being able to accept that and be able to take that rather than fear it. Fearing change is not good, but what you want is to embrace change and find opportunities in each situation you put yourself in. So as you can see here, this is the HTC Vive. This came about as when I was talking before, like this game, when it shipped, we had to close down our studio and I had to find a job. And at this point, VR or virtual reality was kind of starting to pick up. And I kind of wanted to get into that because actually, big into VR ever since the 90s when they first came out. And the resurgence, it kind of disappeared from the late 90s to the early 2000 or to the 2010s, right? And not until 2012, 2015 time frame where VR really started picking back up again. And I found this opportunity to work for HTC because I was just looking for work. And when I was looking for work, I saw HTC's opening, job opening, and said, we need someone who knows 3D and Unity. And this game that I made is obviously 3D and was made in the Unity game engine. So I applied, and in that course of the interview, I actually went and go like, wow, this is going to be interesting. Even though they didn't really tell me what it was I was working on, I kind of had a good idea that it was going to be a virtual reality headset. And during that time, when I was interviewing at HTC, I also was interviewing for another company, which was doing VR as well. But here's the funny thing about that was the other company literally was offering like 50% more in pay than HTC, right? Granted, that was more of contract, which typically pays more, but what I did was I did not follow the money. Right? I followed what I thought as my gut instincts was the right decision, and I accepted the HTC offer. And the reason I did that is because I found that money will make you happy, yeah, if you have enough of it. But up to a certain degree, after that, it doesn't make you any happier, right? Once you reach a certain amount of income, you start looking at projects that make you happy. So whenever you find yourself in that situation in your career, I highly suggest to go for the thing that you want to work on rather than chasing money, because money, as we all know, disappears faster the more you have it, right? So I suggest that you just go for your career choice of what you want to work on, especially if you're going to be working long hours, right? 60 hours, 80 hours. And the cool thing about this project was this enabled me to actually travel all over, right? I traveled constantly to Taiwan, where HTC is headquartered. We had an office up in Seattle. So almost every month I had to travel to Taiwan to talk to the corporate office and give demos there. And that was a fun part of my career because I was basically, living the dream of traveling and just enjoying other cultures and learning about, learning about Taiwan and how they did things differently from the United States. And obviously working on a very cool demo or cool product, right? Literally changing how everything can be done with simulations and gaming, education. And that was really very gratifying for me because at that point in my career, I wanted to, I know a lot about games, but I want to go beyond games, right? So that was kind of like my transformation in my career was like, I have a lot of this gaming background and I think I can bring that into more commercial enterprise type situations. So because of that, I kind of transitioned and helped me get into the Hall of Fame. So this picture was in 2017 or 2016, Hall of Fame 8 with my other Hall of Fame brothers here, Stephen Perez. Stephen Perez, he works on Westworld, is a VP at HBO, works on Westworld. He works on Game of Thrones and pretty much any of the big HBO products. We have Martin Potensi, who does a lot of live events. He actually produced his own show that he was inducted in, and we have over here Jack Geckler, who has worked on Star Wars, Frozen 2, Avatar. He's done a lot of the 3D work there that you've seen and loved. And Stephen Miller as well here is an accomplished director and has many films underneath his belt. And this kind of, I guess, what I did in my career change and my shift was kind of validated by being awarded or being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So this has been a very fun and important part of my life. And if you ever get to Full Sail, definitely attend the Hall of Fame because Hall of Fame is such a sweet week because everyone kind of comes together. You get to meet all these alumni. You get to meet more of your classmates and fellow students. and really it's a time to celebrate the uniqueness of the school, because no other school I think can ever pull off the way we do here. So if you ever, in campus or have opportunity to attend Hall of Fame, please do. It's a great experience, whether you're being inducted or not. Hopefully, you get inducted to 10 years after you graduate. So from there too, so one thing about VR, right, is once you get addicted to not VR, but working on innovative products, right? They saw like, hey, I've made my mark. I've helped transition the revolution. You kind of want to strike on your own, because that's one thing that drives me is I'm very entrepreneurial in nature. So I like working for someone, and I like working for myself as well. So every time I see an opportunity to work on a project, I do it, right? So one here is called Rumi, which we actually, I left HTC to start this company, basically doing VR conferencing and collaboration. What does that mean is, and you can actually learn while you're away from each other in a virtual environment. And with VR, right, think about this, right? When you're going to school, one of the fondest memories you'll have is probably going on a field trip, right? When you're going to a museum or go to to an art gallery, science museum, natural history museum, to see things, because you wanted to not just read about it, but you want to feel it, right? And with VR, you can take virtual field trips anywhere. You can be on Mars, you can be in the time of the dinosaurs, or a big, experience the ravages of World War II, and all these fun stuff that will leave more of a lasting impact if you experience it rather than read about it. And that's one of the reasons we kind of created this information, this kind of platform to really experience that. And thankfully, I was lucky enough to be able to bring Rumi to Full Sail University. So what we have here is one of the earlier classes when we were teaching. Students from the online degrees and on campus, and having them attend the same class together. So people were learning in the classroom and online, and really be together. And that's something that wasn't really possible before with the degrees. So we were kind of experimenting, and Full Sail has been very gracious in helping us kind of push forward how we actually learn and all that fun stuff. So we did this a lot. We've done tours in Brazil for it. We've done presentations, people coming in and showing them, hey, this is the future of education. This is what we should aspire to, especially now with the current climate of what's happening around the world, right? We need more technologies like this that bring people together while keeping them safe. So as we kind of continue pushing into this, it's a very important part. So another thing I did too was, being an entrepreneur, it's very hard. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not for everyone typically. Not because that you can't do it, but because do you like, being constantly stressed by money. This one thing about being an entrepreneur is you have to worry more than just your job. You have to worry about other people and raising money and spending money wisely. And it's hard, right? For every, Facebook, Google, Tesla, you name it, company, there's, literally thousands of other companies that went under, right? And in my experience, like it's hard, right? We see what survives instead of what kind of came before it. And my company I created, Doghead Simulations, no different, right? We ran out of money, and I kind of had to put that on hold. Doghead still exists, but kind of had to step away from it to kind of reevaluate what I'm doing and kind of recharge my money. Because one thing about being an entrepreneur, you're not going to get rich anytime soon. You might be lucky you can strike gold and sell your company within a year, but a lot of times you just end up burning a lot of money, which is fine. Because like I said, if you follow your dreams, money becomes secondary. And at this point, it became secondary until it's not. And that's when it kind of ran out. So what happened was, so I was in Florida doing this and went back to Seattle to kind of work on a different kind of immersive technology, and that is called the HoloLens 2. So right now, I'm a consultant for Valorum Reply, which is a consulting firm, and I'm in a team that develops a lot of experiences for the HoloLens 2. So right now, if you can see here, I have a HoloLens 2. And I use this to develop enterprise applications for all kinds of customers. A lot of them is Microsoft in itself, but also other companies that want to explore augmented reality. And with augmented reality, right, a very different fact from VR is in virtual reality, you're in a fully synthetic environment. But what does that mean? That means is you're transported into a world somewhere else, right? You're not in your current reality, you're not on Earth, you're somewhere else. You're in a computer world. But with augmented reality, what we're doing is we're bringing the 3D world, like kind of similar to games, into the real world. So that, for example, in this scenario with this gentleman over here, is you can figure out how a piece of machinery works. Let's say it breaks down and it's a complex piece of machinery. In the old days, you would maybe have a manual, right? And kind of have to figure out, okay, which part is this? What page do I go through? And what do I do, right? But now, instead of having to go search for it, you can just look at it, look at the piece of machinery. The HoloLens knows what it's looking at, and you can say, and it'll give you contextual information. What that means is it'll give you all the information you need about the machine. Maybe it'll tell you, hey, is it broken? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna tap on this menu, and it'll give you information. Okay, well, why is it broken? If it's connected to the internet, it might give you the information. Or maybe it'll just tell you, hey, these are the reasons it could be broken. It'll ask you questions. And then from there, once you've pinpointed out the problem, it'll give you step-by-step information on how to fix it, right? So what does that mean? That means that almost anyone can fix complex machinery, right? And really have it so that it's easier and less likely that you break these expensive machines. So this is a great revolution. And not just that, right? In medicine, in telecommuting, in your workplace, like anything that requires a human, virtual reality and augmented reality is something that is needed. And it's a very powerful technology, and especially now, right? Especially if you are thinking about getting into technology as a student, this is a fun time to be there because there's so much to learn, so much to do in these new technologies that we have not discovered yet. And we will need every single one of you, to dream about what the next, compute platform is, or how do we interact in this new world? Because think about it, right? On a cell phone like this, right? It's a 2D screen. It's very. We've been doing this for a long time, for decades, right? And you're constrained to this 2D world, but in virtual reality and augmented reality, you have the world as your interface, and no one has really cracked that yet, and it's going to take a lot longer than the 3D screens to figure out. So if you are really interested in these kinds of technologies, I highly recommend going to Full Sail University. Check out the website, check out all the information, talk to Carol, talk to graduates, reach out to them, especially to the Hall of Famers. We say to everyone, hey, reach out to us. But very few people do, and those that do, we certainly do help them out because we believe that the industry needs more people, talented people just like you. And that being said, I want to say thank you. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me at mechaghost@gmail.com. I usually reply pretty quickly. If you have questions specifically about me, my degree, or what I do, please send me an email, or you can contact me via Twitter or my Instagram. But if you go to my Instagram, you just mostly see food. But if you love food like me, go there. But like I said, thank you very much for listening. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, or ask Carol for my information if you forget. I'm more than happy to help out with your questions. Thank you very much.